Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me this week, once again, the soft-spoken cream to my louder milk, it's Brian. Come on, that's pretty cool,
Hey,
right?
Scott, how are you? That's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, I kept trying to figure out how to phrase the cream part, because the original phrasing I think I had in my mind sounded just a little bit too... like we're going to be podcasting about a totally different kind of genre that we usually wouldn't cover on a podcast like this.
Well, I have had a super long day, so if you said I was whipped cream, it wouldn't be necessarily, it wouldn't be a bad kind of double entendre, because it's been a long week.
God damn it, I didn't even think of whipped cream. That's so much better than what I thought of. Anyway, yeah, we are back again this week in the post-midnight hours, thanks to me passing out during an awful baseball game. Although we had a couple really good ones in a row this week, so who cares? But we are back here to talk about Legion. I have been watching some other television as of late, which all seems to be sort of Legion-related. As I mentioned a few times at the end of our podcast, I am trying to catch up to certain other podcasting people, such as you, Brian, as well as the missing Dan and Jamie, I think, as well. So you all have watched completed the second season of Dark, and I needed to rewatch season 1, and I am now, I think I just passed the halfway point of season 2. So I am there. I am going to get it finished within the next day or two. It's very good so far.
It's very good.
Yeah, but I'll save it for that future. So in other words, I would anticipate sometime in the next, depending on people's schedules, because you're a busy man, and Dan takes 800 vacations a year, so who knows? Still haven't figured that out yet. My hope is that sometime, say in the next, we'll just be conservative and say in the next week to 10 days, maybe sooner, we will actually do the Dark podcast finally for season 2. Now that it's all burned into my brain, I can follow. Now I know who everybody is, and I understand every single storyline going on. Also, I think I might have mentioned before, I've been watching intermittently either season 2 now of Legion, as well as I just watched most of season 2 of Fargo as well, after finishing season 1 with somebody. I've forgotten how many, obviously they're both Noah Hawley productions, creations, whatever. I'd forgotten how many connections there are cast-wise between Fargo and Legion. Because
yeah, quite a bit.
Right, because you had made the reference to Rachel Keller, who obviously is, we know her as Sid on Legion, and she was, of course, Simone Gerhardt on season 2 of Fargo, and of course I remember Jean Smart, because Jean Smart, the missing Melanie Bird, this season. Never was clear. I can't remember because I haven't completed the rewatch of season 2 of Legion, so I don't remember what the resolution was for her character, if there was one, or we're just not talking about it. If you remember, feel free to fill me in. Because I'm just drawing a blank on it.
Her and her lover man are sort of off, and they left them sort of off to their own devices, and I think we're going to see them next week.
Oh, okay. Excellent. I have not tried to spoil myself by looking up her on IMDb or anything like that. But she was, and of course she was amazing as Floyd Gerhardt on season 2. Really, I mean, she's fine on Legion, but she's amazing on Fargo. What I had forgotten was number one, the guy Mackenzie Gray, who played, quote unquote, the Eye in season 1 of Legion, which the guy with the weird eye thing going on. He shows up briefly in season 2 of Fargo as part of a vision that Kirsten Dunst's character has, Peggy. I think he's just listed as Albert. My impression is he would have been the guy she would have seen if she had ever made it to that Life Spring seminar or something from the way he was speaking to her. And also in season 2 of Fargo, the guy who plays the 1970s version of Detective Ben Schmidt, who we also, I believe, see briefly in season 1 as a much older guy. That's the actor, I actually did write this down for a change, Keir O'Donnell. And now we can get to the current episode, because he's also the guy who plays Daniel on Legion, who I had almost forgotten about until the latest episode. And look how it brought us right there.
Landed that plane perfect.
And then I really had no idea where I was going with that one. So, with that said, let's get started talking about Chapter 24 of Legion. Here's your nice tight synopsis. As declared at the end of the previous chapter, this is the one where David goes to war. So we're going to get to the nitty-gritty with all the shocking and emotional details and, our discussion. It's mostly going to be Brian tonight, I think. We'll see. Because I'm sleepy. But I might Dan it tonight. No, I kid. You didn't hear. You guys didn't hear me say that. He'll never hear it. But suffice to say, David decimates Division 3. Ooh, just did some alliteration by accident. To retrieve his time-traveling minion, Switch. Look at that. Boom. That's my synopsis. Yeah.
Very succinct.
Very succinct. There you go. Gone are the days of the hour-and-a-half recaps.
The blow-by-blow recap.
Yes. So there are a lot of... It's weird that I'm going to say there's a lot of fun things to unpack in this episode, because what's actually happening isn't necessarily fun for the characters, or may not even be fun for the viewer. But I just call them fun because there's just so much death. Oh, by the way, another thing from Fargo. I was watching, and they refer to some place they're going to, and the place probably exists or something like that, as Vermilion. And I went, oh, is that kind of like does that give Hawley the idea to to use the phrase Vermilion when he talks about the chicks with the weird haircuts and mustaches on Legion? Just wondering. Anyway. So let's get started, and this is one of those episodes I feel like we maybe somewhat unintentionally, and maybe we won't, maybe I'm wrong. I kind of think we're going to end up talking about this one in a somewhat chronological way, without even meaning to, just because of the way the episode is laid out. I think that might be what's going to happen, unless you decide to go right to talk about Lenny right off the bat or something. Because you might. Up to you, Brian. Take over.
I thought the way it started, I was a little disoriented. Like, why are we looking at a moving, bus? But I think it establishes right away that David sort of, where we left David, really sort of leaning into his powers and just going batshit crazy with them. He sort of almost has a very calm, playful way that sort of made him more menacing the way this started. And I wasn't sure that he was going to let Daniel live, but the way that he let Daniel live was very cruel and sort of sets the tone for, his continued emotional descent into obliviousness about how evil the things he is doing are.
Right.
But I thought, as usual, another great opening. The credits are always different in the way this opened. I mean, it almost kind of looked like sort of a Breaking Bad type look to the very beginning of the episode, and then it just goes from there. And I think probably the first thing that's notable based on what we've talked about is that Farouk is ultimately the one that sort of is irritated and sets David. I mean, David can't do any of the awful things he does to basically wipe out all of Division 3 without Farouk's help, and Farouk helps him.
Right.
And we've been saying that all along, how can you trust this person? And Farouk shows his true colors.
Right. Right. I mean, Farouk's motivations are very interesting because he seems to, much the way he's always been. There's a serpentine quality to what he does and what he says and his actions. Because, I believe that he has done things that have been to genuinely help Division 3 and to try to catch or get David. But he kind of flips from that because if they're not following his way, then he just like, okay, I don't really want to be wasted with these guys. I'm just going to flip over to David, my beautiful boy sort of thing. Mm-hmm. About that opening, yeah, I was thinking a little bit when we got that wide open road and whatever. Breaking Bad did occur to me a little bit there. And his ability. It's interesting because it reminds me of the way we've seen characters in the previous seasons who were basically the stand-ins or avatars or whatever you want to call it for Farouk, and the way they acted with their powers when they kind of just killed nonchalantly. Mm-hmm. And now we see David is completely doing that now. From the way he takes out everyone, and he goes about it with a certain cruelty. Not just obviously what he does to Daniel is the worst thing, where he basically gives Daniel Alzheimer's essentially. Mm-hmm. But even the guy, just the nondescript guy who's just pleading for his life, and David pretty much extinguishes him. There's really no reason to do that.
No.
It's, you can flick people away. You can knock them out. I mean, Christ, even Hansy in Fargo, shoots 3 guys in the leg instead of murdering all of them. But I don't think there's anyone watching the show who is actually quote unquote rooting for David at this point. I think at best we're rooting for somehow, some way, someone to break through to him. Some sort of epiphany that will make him see the error of his ways, but I think he may be too far gone. I don't know. We've got a lot of seasons still left to go, so I imagine we something along those lines has to happen. But I don't know. It's wow.
The couple of notes I made based on what we've talked about is a couple of things we've discussed before is what will Farouk do to sort of screw Division 3? And we sort of saw that in this. And the other thing we had talked about sort of before, in addition to that, was would we see like Legion, the multiple Davids?
Yes.
We got to see that. So
I thought that was so important.
Yeah.
I thought that's one of the few times where something is being done where maybe even mostly previous to that, we would take these things that are like really amazing visuals and go, oh, they're just being either really be self-indulgent or look what we can do, whatever. The David thing, I've been waiting for this. And we've certainly had the thing with the multiple Davids before, but it's always seemed like, oh, there's 2 or there's 3, whatever. And my understanding is like, no, I think there should be like 100 or more. Mm-hmm. He's like the most extreme, which goes back to when we spoke, I think, earlier this season, referencing previous seasons, the whole question of, the powers are crazy. It's like, why is no one saying he can't be both? Because I kind of think he's both. I think he does have these abilities, and I think he's also crazy as well. I mean, maybe that's thanks to Farouk's influence over the course of his lifetime or not, or maybe it's just sometimes that what is it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely, kind of a thing.
Right. Right.
Maybe that's. But I thought that scene, which is later in the episode, was really wow. That was something. I was very impressed that they went with there, and because otherwise, was up until that point, I was wondering if Sid touched him, if she could just take care of business, because there wouldn't be much he could do in her body, and she could pretty much, bring him in to be captured at the very least. That's why he can't do that. It wouldn't work, and them showing that was really kind of strong. What? So, with that, what does he do to her?
I'm not sure. And as I watched it and thought about it, and I watched it again, um, I think she is sort of put. I think she's sort of put mentally on ice, and I think she's taken to where he can try to use her, but it's not
Mm,
sure how. It's not clear how he's going to do that. And what what I liked about that scene in particular was all the things she said up until that moment were the things you were going, oh, please don't be an apologist, don't do this, and something that I think this show you and I've talked about before that this season is focused and not doing, and the reason I wanted to bring up those points is this show has sort of like ran us down, side alleys that don't go anywhere, or raised things that it didn't necessarily follow through to completion, but ideas and things it has followed through. And it's been so long since we've really thought about Sid's power and seen it used. She talked about it with herself, but you hadn't seen her actually do it in a little while.
right.
And at the moment she did it, it didn't shock me, but I was kind of like, oh yeah, that's why she's saying that stuff. But nobody in this show, other than really David, uses their powers so much that that's sort of the focus of who they are as a character. So, um, it was nice. I think the idea is, if you have a person with 100 minds and you take control of one of the minds, you've still got 99 minds to fight to get out, and
Right.
that's where she's stuck. The question is, if she reverts back, what's going on then, and what happens then?
Mm,
And it was really neat. I hadn't even considered the idea, and maybe she hadn't either, that if at the moment you switch and then you're in the middle of your home base, there's the real possibility people will kill you. And she does in that moment is at least willing to give her life. And when she says, just do it and I can jump back, I'm not sure that's, I'm not confident that would have been true. But it wasn't a thought that if she weakened him and got there wasn't a great escape plan. There wasn't a plan for if she did that, what to do with him then. There wasn't Carrie or Carrie standing by. They just sort of ran into each other in the hall. So I guess my question would be, in doing that, I don't know what her plan was, other than maybe to try to get empathy with David, because that's what he lacks, and that's what really he throughout the episode shows, that he's gone so far he has no empathy left. That even his first closest friend, Lenny, he lacks empathy for her, and he can't understand why. And the first thing with Daniel is symbolic of the whole thing. Like, hey, just erase Daniel. Well, the consequences of erasing Daniel is the pain it causes to Clark, and that it doesn't fix anything to just erase someone's mind. And
right.
it's another horrible invasion, like what he did with Sid. But somehow he thinks like that's a different way than killing or just erasing all the people. And in many ways, it's no different. And if nothing, maybe even more painful than what happens. But he doesn't understand that.
Right. It harkens back to when Sid was talking to him. I can't remember if it was this episode or the previous one, when they had their conversation and her concern about being erased.
Right.
Because the whole with the time travel scenarios that David has been cooking up. I'm not sure what the final situation was with Sid by the time this episode is over. On one hand, I want to say, oh no, I want to embrace what you said, and that could very well be what it is. Maybe it probably is. They did leave it in a way that made you think she may be some version of dead right now. It
Right.
might be brain dead. It might be something where the way he apologizes afterwards. I mean, he's not. I mean, he might not be crying, but he's just. It seems like he's sorry for what he's done to her now. It's hard to judge. It's especially in an episode where they seem to pretty much kill practically everybody on the ship, or he does actually.
Right, but it's like with him, it's not like the sense I get is like this, is that he's at the point where it's not that he's sorry for what he did to her. He's sorry that he feels like he had to do that.
Yeah.
That it's like, like I was put in this position and I'm so sorry this had to happen because this is the only way I can make us happy and get what I want. And that's an apology of sorts, but it's an apology that lacks true empathy.
Right.
And that's his whole problem. And I'll be honest with you, talking about deaths. I mean, I was a little worried when he found out, that scientist Carrie took Switch,
Mm-hmm.
that he was pissed. I thought based on how this started with Clark and the Daniel and, the roadside set piece, I was really worried about Carrie.
Yeah.
Because he took Switch, and that's all he wants is to get the Switch and fix everything and make it change. And, and I was worried about Sword Carrie. I mean, they really upped the stakes. And I'll be honest with you. I think you and I both have talked before. We fully expect there to be carnage and death and maybe no happy endings. But some deaths happened in this episode that I don't think we thought were going to happen this soon.
No. Well, right. I mean, right off the bat, Lenny. I mean, first of all, shout out to Games Without Frontiers. Great use of a great song.
Yeah. Great song.
Great song. Love that song. So yeah, that's the first big one. Is the death of Lenny. It was interesting that it seems like she just discovered her humanity just in time to decide to die. And I think we had imagined there were possible scenarios where she may even, quote unquote, switch sides or something along those lines. That she finally sees David for what he is, and or has become a more realized or actualized person. Now, I'm talking like Peggy in season 2 of Fargo. But I did not. I will give Hawley and crew all the credit in the world. I did not see that coming. I didn't. During that scene, I was wondering about it, and it's like, wow, they're playing this like it's going to go a certain way, but no, they wouldn't. Not going to do that. And then it happened in a pretty irretrievable way. Although that's a big question I have, and I'm kind of wondering, and which we'll probably address momentarily. The whole the nice little moment between them was the "Why is it blue? It's always blue."
Yeah.
Which has been said before on the show. It's even the name of the. There's actually an album that Noah Hawley and I guess Jeff Russo released last year, covering all the songs that they've covered on the soundtrack of Legion, which is called "It's Always Blue." So it's something a little self-referential there. I mean, it wasn't enough to get. It wasn't like it didn't make me like want to cry or anything. But I think I was more shocked. I think it's because I was too busy being shocked by it. I was like, and then when we see her later, it looks like she's become part of the tree. Did you notice that? Which was made me think a little bit of autonomy or something like that, or whatever the hell is going on in that damn house. I don't know.
The weird tree of life, but thinking of Clark and what we saw in the imagery in David, there's sort of a childlike, and I think what jogged my memory was when you said, when they use Games Without Frontiers, it has a very childlike reference to war and so it's sort of a childlike view of what war is like, seen through a child's eyes. And you sort of see that's sort of David's perspective on the use of power, that even before he kills Clark, like he turns his gun into a rubber ducky, like when Clark goes to reach for the gun.
Mm-hmm.
It's, he didn't just make it disappearing. It's a rubber ducky. So it's sort of, David's simplistic, almost childlike view of this and not contemplating the full scope of what he's doing sort of runs throughout it. And, the violence with which he did and the casual way in which he did it has gotten more so. I mean, think about when the Division 3 first invaded the house. David's fighting for his life and is at times looking scared, trying his best to move through, but not at all confidently. By this time, he's completely confident and brushing aside and threats and making people disappear. And
remember, it was just a season ago. This is the guy who was insisting that Farouk not kill anybody when he went on these raids to try to, when he was trying to find his body, and he kept getting upset that people were getting killed. Now he's doing it with, at the same rate, if not more so, than what Farouk was doing. He's basically, they're mirror images of each other now, more so than ever before.
Right, except Farouk is more calculating and intelligent, and understands what he's doing.
Well,
and accepts it. David doesn't understand.
Exactly. Well, it goes to what you were just saying about David approaching, the fighting or war like a child. I mean, quite frankly, it's always been that David is the child and Farouk is the adult.
Right.
And that's how Farouk even looks at him as a child ever. So therefore, when you're a child, you're doing things, and I think Farouk says this, pretty much says in the episode, David is letting his emotions guide him. He's just acting out. Whereas Farouk, being the adult, more mature one, he refers to himself as he's a strategist. He plays the long game. Which is what hell, that's what he did in living inside David's brain all this time. He's definitely Mr. Plays the long game, whatever. It's interesting that with the things that David does and how he extinguishes people like Clark and so on and so forth, which was sorry to see him go as well, because I really like that character.
Yeah.
But he zaps Farouk back to that 70s Polaroid universe, which I thought, okay, but he can return from that. He's not trapped there. It's not like the Phantom Zone. So it's almost like they almost kind of avoided giving us like a real showdown between those two. Although we have gone there already, but I feel like we are going to have to go there again before the season is over. I think maybe it's just too soon for them to do that. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, speaking of Farouk and David, on to play off what you said, also, Farouk is David's dad in a sense, and that's says like my boy, like talking about David, Charles may be his father, but Farouk raised him, and Farouk has raised him, and it almost, in watching the episode when it was over, made me wonder if all of this, in seeing that Farouk went there, got him to come to Division 3, and then is doing this before he was zapped, that if Farouk really didn't have any design on killing David, that if maybe he was seeing his son come into his powers, and that was Farouk's ultimate aim. And I think because Farouk's been put in a Faraday cage that you and I both think he'll eventually be released from and have to be dealt with, that's still in play.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking up something about David because I'm kind of curious because I don't remember what happened. Because we were talking about Farouk being kind of like the, let's say, surrogate father, so to speak.
Right.
He certainly views himself that way. Even, I'm not saying I wouldn't say David views him that way, but I think he views himself that way. And of course, Charles Xavier was his biological father. I suddenly couldn't like, wait, I don't remember what the heck ever happened to David's actual adoptive parents. So I was just quickly looking it up online because I don't remember whatever happened to them. There's very little information about it. Interesting. Huh.
It's an interesting whole.
Yeah, because it comes like you look up like on the Legion wiki or something. All of a sudden you're like David's mother, Mrs. Haller, who's obviously the actual mother of his sister, and we know what happened to her, right. And his adopted mother, and literally all the information they have about her is she and the Haller family lived in the country. When Amy was 4, a man came to the Haller family and asked him to adopt his son. The family accepted and took David in as their own and raised him as such. They did not tell David he was adopted. For a long time, Amy thought it was a dream, having a little brother, but she soon came to accept her new reality. As David grew up, Mrs. Haller would often garden with him. She would also measure his height on a wall. Her powers and abilities. She can cook and also maintains a garden. That's all the information? That's it?
Yeah.
Lord. Okay. Because, if he was, anyway, whatever. Very strange that I understand them not playing a major part, but you'd think they would have been something. Anyway. Sorry, didn't mean to sidetrack us there.
No. I mean, but it's interesting to think that the price David paid for Lenny to be resurrected with his sister and the things that happen for then, when Lenny confronts him before she takes her own life, he in that moment lacks empathy too for her. And that's how far he's come. And that Lenny not only was his friend before the twisted vision, took over what Lenny was to him. And then Lenny, basically was resurrected because of David's sister. I mean, there's a lot tied up in that character, and all he wants was her when he needed her. Like, mm-hmm. I need you. But when he didn't need her, he didn't care. He'd replace her with Switch.
Right.
And
it's okay, go on. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and so in that void of where David just continued to look for people who were useful to him, she actually found someone that was meaningful to her and something that was meaningful to her and loved and cared about someone in weirdly, in a strange way where she's not really a human. She loved like a human. And as we were saying last week, she was getting more human and becoming less a monster, and he increasingly gets less human and more monster, and that it sort of reached critical mass this week.
Yeah, and to build on that, it's interesting how David is actually at this point, one can say he's kind of gone beyond that which he opposed before. The way that either was Farouk or as Oliver or as Lenny, what they did, Farouk has kind of embraced his power, views himself as a god, and that's pretty much it. But we don't really see any sort of reason for him to believe or think otherwise, if that makes any sense. I mean, he's had this near immortality because he's been alive for quite some time, if I recall correctly.
Right.
David, in a way, I think is worse to a certain degree because he's committing acts that are just as heinous. Neither one of those two have anything remotely resembling empathy at this point. But David is still operating under this intense level of, and I've been saying it, I think, every podcast, so I'll become just Mr. Repetition here, such a heavy level of denial and delusion about himself. And it's one thing to be self-deluded, and we're not talking about delusions of grandeur, because, good Lord, those two characters, they are practically omnipotent with their abilities and powers. But it's his whole thing about, the fact that he still will view himself as a victim, the fact that he just wants to fix things. He just thinks he deserves love, and it's all about that. And then which leads to that. What to make of the song uh,
talk about ironic in a very poignant way.
so here's a question. Now there's been a number of scenes on Legion where they go the somewhat musical route. There's actual singing involved. There could be dancing involved or entire numbers involved. Um, and I'm always left wondering with each one, there's that, is this real? Is this actually happening? Certain things happened, but they were on another plane, perhaps, or certain things happened within someone's mind, and certain things actually, were made to happen, even if people were used as puppets to act out or sing out the sequences, whatever. So you have this sequence, which is basically David's way of trying to explain himself, and I think David's kind of done that in the past, where he's not able to fully articulate himself, but then he kind of falls back on some sort of on a song. I think that's happened before. But when you start having dead people singing in it, when you see Clark floating in outer space and he's singing along with the song, when you have Rachel, I'm sorry, that's the actress's name, Sid, who at this point, I'm personally categorizing her as I'm going Monty Python here. I'm categorizing her as mostly dead, but with a fair chance of coming back. I thought it was kind of ballsy of them because they practically do the whole song. It felt like, because that wasn't a show that that went on. At least it went on for a few more than just like 60 to 90 seconds. That went on for a while, I thought.
It's curious you raised that, because I thought the same thing, and we've seen the montage before, and you and I had a conversation about whether that, is this real? Is this some manifestation? I think that now, after seeing this, I think we can guess that those montages are David's stunted emotional way of processing emotion through a song.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost like, when you're a teenage boy and you're heartbroken and you listen to the same song 20 times.
Yep,
because
exactly.
It speaks to you in this profound way. Not that, as an older guy, there's not music that moves me, but there's something about when your heart's really broken, and I think this sort of tells us that those moments are really David's internal way of processing things.
Yeah, I agree. And absolutely right about the song. I mean, yeah, we'll remember songs will affect us as we get older, but it's when you're a teenager, like that's the one. If you're a teenager in the 80s and you broke up, so you end up playing With or Without You in your bedroom in the dark, 50 times in a row. If you were, if it was the early 70s, maybe it was a Doors song. Who God knows what else. I don't know if I've said this I know I haven't said it this season. I don't recall if I said it in the previous two. I don't think I did. No, I wouldn't have the first two seasons because David hadn't gone, quote unquote bad, and now he has. I haven't said it. To me, right now, at this point in time, David is practically the kid from It's a Good Life, the Twilight Zone episode, the classic Twilight Zone episode, grown up. That's kind of what he is right now. Because his abilities are, I don't see the limit to them, quite frankly. It's just, at first I thought, oh, he's got telekinesis and he can kind of read people's minds, and I was like, oh, there's a whole lot more he can apparently do, because he's able to erase people's minds. Jesus. Yeah. So that song, I agree. That was my take on it as well. It's like, okay, this. Once we saw dead people singing, I was like, okay, now it kind of illuminated all the previous moments to me. I was like, okay, this is kind of David's way of. It's a coping mechanism, in a weird way. Is there anything? I'm trying to think what else I wanted to discuss about this episode. I feel like there's a couple things I'm forgetting, but maybe I'm not forgetting anything. Is there anything else?
I mean, no, it was a pretty unlike a lot of episodes of Legion, this one was pretty tight. It just sort of focused on David, and I think if there is one final thing I think maybe we should talk about, and the question I had to sort of flip back to you.
Oh, I have a
Are we to believe that Switch was a robot the entire time, or like the wind up thing when she raises her hair, and like did her father build her? And
yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah. Um, my impression was I think they are kind of hinting at that because from the get go they talked about her father was a robot and maybe I am one as well, and the way her entire existence seems to be about learning about time traveling and being an outsider and not really socializing with others, and her and I don't know if there is anything to her existence beyond what we've seen. So, yeah, I'm kind of thinking that there's a very strong possibility that that's all she is.
and I thought, I mean, in a show that it pulls just about everything out and does, and you're not surprised by almost anything they do because anything's on the table. When she lifted her hair and I saw that thing in the back of her neck, I was like, well, I didn't see that like that. I mean, it was something different.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it could be just a red herring being thrown at us, and it doesn't actually mean what we take it to mean. I find it funny because Switch seems to have a certain level of humanity. I'm using that phrase again. That we don't see in a lot of the characters on Legion, and she's also at this point in time she was surrounded by other female robot types who don't really have any emotional capacity of any kind.
Right.
And meanwhile, she probably has more so than all the other characters combined, other than maybe Carrie and Carrie or something at this point.
Mm-hmm.
What's the hierarchy with Division 3? So, did Clark end up being the guy in charge at this point? And with Clark being put out, did Sid but what's Tanami's role? Is he actually the one in charge? Because he's kind of taken over I guess he's taken over for Admiral Fukuyama.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very... It's just, Sid seems to have elevated in the ranks. Because she's like giving orders and stuff. I was kind of confused by that a little bit. I mean, it's not that big a deal, I know. I just was wondering.
It definitely seemed like it. I don't think Tanami's in charge. I think Tanami is the administration of Division 3, if you will. When something needs to be done or a question needs to be solved, he solves it.
I gotcha. Okay, he's not the boss. He's the office manager.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, and I did think it was cool, like when Tanami got into the box to cover himself up to protect himself when they were under attack, and the ship going into space, and like nobody seemed to know it could go into space. I thought was kind of comical. Like, oh, we could do that? Okay, maybe we'll get out of David's range. So I thought that that was comical, but this episode, unlike a lot of episodes, didn't really have like a B story. It wasn't like an A story and a B story or a subplot. This was just really David going on his path to prepare for war and go to war, and what came out of that. And so, unlike a lot of more complex episodes, this was, in its crazy way, it was maybe one of the most straightforward episodes of the show ever.
I agree. It was absolutely. I remember thinking that we're not really like cutting back and forth because we're all here. I mean, you had maybe a little bit in the beginning, but it still was kind of following that path. So early on, when he goes back to the House of David with all his little disciples, does he actually kill them all? A bunch, or not all of them, but a ton of them in that room. When they come in and they think he killed them, and he's like, "Oh no, I just sent them somewhere else." I was like, "No, I think he killed them."
He zapped them, and where they went is, I mean, the thing is, depending on how you view his power, and we've seen this once before in the show, he could have absorbed them and they could all be inside of him. And like, they're still with him in a real creepy way, but they're not with the world anymore. And, it was another thing where people are showing him love, but it's not what he wants. And so he gets irritated, zaps them away.
Yeah.
And then the people come in and, and then, the most obvious in this episode, the most obvious sort of Manson family, like montage of, them fighting Carrie, the sort of cutaway to all of his cronies wanting to battle Carrie. You sort of see like things got real Manson-y.
Oh yeah, well they're on the ship in the ship, with knives, and before they have the battle with Carrie. I mean, I believe we see them like descend upon like different people or soldiers, whatever, stabby, which is a lot more horrific than just throwing a simple gunshot or something. Not that I'm speaking up for guns or anything, but you know what I mean. They've gone. I mean, I've been saying from the get-go, and I think most people as well, and you, David's thing has been established as some sort of wacky throwback cult from the get-go. And when we see scenes like this, like, okay, yeah, there's the Manson side of it. Yeah, it's totally what they've been doing.
But I thought the one thing, and you and I have always appreciated sort of the wry humor of it. It was kind of funny when they were creeping around the airship. Like, it's almost like they were like stealth ninjas. Like they could sneak through the background, and there were shots that almost were like Scooby-Doo shots where you'd see them walk through the hall and the people wouldn't see them, and then they'd sneak up on them. So it was done. I mean, probably the most interesting thing to me about this episode and the way this is done is there was a horrible amount of violence, but it wasn't gory or schlocky, and it was shot in a way that the violence, it didn't take away from the emotional violence that happened, because that's the core of what this is about. And, really, if you think about it, like, who has the best loving relationship on the show? It was Clark and his partner. And they were the only people that sort of had a healthy, happy, like, loving relationship. And David destroyed that and thought, I could erase this. And the real violence he did, and especially in what he wanted to do, and it was Sid that said, is will it hurt if I'm erased? Will it hurt? There's an emotional violence that David is committing and doing that is in a way beyond what Farouk ever did. Farouk just did violence for violence sake. David's committing like directed emotional violence at people, many of whom he worked with and were his friends, and the woman he loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like if your enemy tries to hurt you, okay, they're your enemy. That's Farouk. But when somebody you're really close to does that to you, it's a violation of a higher order.
Yeah, it's a betrayal.
Yes.
As well. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just now. My mind is like flipping around. I'm just thinking that I actually let out a little hoot when he actually uses the phrase "I am Legion." It's like, finally, that's why they named the show Legion. You had to wait till the 24th episode for them finally to actually say it. Anyway.
I think in season 1, either off air or I don't remember if we talked about it on a podcast. I think you and I wonder if they would ever actually say it, like if that would ever happen. And
that sounds really familiar to me. I think that was speculated about, and I kept going, it's got to be said at some point. Yeah. It's one of those things I kept thinking it would be like the end of a season kind of declaration or something, and but Hawley does not go for the obvious. So but
it was really cool. It was to Sid, like. It wasn't like a play for the moment. It was to Sid in the moment where you feel her peril of being inside his mind.
Right. All right. Anything else, or should we start to wrap this sucker up?
Let's go to our final thoughts and wrap it up.
Our final thoughts. Well, we've got 3 episodes left of Legion. So, like I said, we still got a sizable chunk of story left. It's not just one more to go. Curious with Hawley, because sometimes he can kind of, if you guys will pardon the phrase, shoot his wad with the penultimate episode sometimes. Sometimes those are bad. Not that the last ones are bad, but like I said, I've just been watching the last couple of seasons of Fargo. The next last one tends to be a bit better than the final episode. I think with Legion, I know in season 1, I liked the final episode a lot, but I think it was a previous episode that I liked a lot more, the one where everything goes crazy with evil Lenny and all that stuff, and Bolero and whatever. All I know about these upcoming episodes, I believe we're going to get flashes again with his parents, as far as Charles Xavier and his mom. I'm wondering with the time traveling aspect of it all, if it's possible what we've just seen, a lot of what we've seen in this episode is going to get undone. I could see them going that route, because that's kind of one of the tricks he played with time travel. They did that famously in an episode of Flash in the first season or 2, where they had this really amazing episode, and everybody went, "Oh, this is all going to get undone." These people getting killed and this, that, and revealed and whatever. So there's a chance Clark could still live. I don't know about Daniel. I'm liking the season, despite the fact that I'm not sure what I should be rooting for, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, and I feel like this show is on track, in that questions I've had and things I want to see play out, even if they don't play out the way I want, that at least they're going down the road I thought it would go down. And I think if you're a Noah Hawley fan, the one thing you should always expect is for him to subvert expectations.
Yes, that's true.
That is his thing. And so whatever he does will have his own spin on it. And I can say every week, as the story grows, like this episode caught me by surprise. I'm ready for next week. I've really enjoyed the sort of tightness of this season in the storytelling, and I mean, for this to happen with 3 episodes left, you're like, I really wonder where we're going.
Yes, right. Well, because is David even going to be able to get anywhere closer to accomplishing what his goal is, and how's that really even going to work anyway? You can't really root for David, and we like obviously we like the characters, assuming whoever is still alive, like Sid or whatever. But it's, I don't know. I guess it's because you're watching something which is less about rooting for the good guys to triumph, which is a more classic superhero-like thing. Sorry about that. Where it's more like you're watching a tragedy.
Yeah,
and it's just a very eventual down. Which is something you see less television-wise than you do in the movies. Although one could say, "Oh, what about Breaking Bad?" It's like, well, no, yeah, Jesse, shut up. But
right.
But this is more like I'm watching like Raging Bull or something along those lines, or Citizen freaking Kane or something. I don't know. Wow.
No, I totally agree with those analogies, but I think what I like about this story and what I think has drawn me to it is we've fallen in love with the anti-hero in television for the last little bit, and David's not really an anti-hero. David is just a flawed person who's just completely buying his own BS. But we see enough about him that I mean, I try to practice what I preach, and I represent people that are charged with crimes, and you can see the person as the crime, or you can see the whole person. And while there are people who are innocent, David is not innocent. David is guilty of a lot of bad things. But we've got to know David as a whole person, so we're not exactly rooting for him to be obliterated, but we do want someone to stop him, and him to at least realize what he's doing is wrong.
Right.
And that's what I think it would be satisfying to us. I mean, the truest tragedy would be for him to die and be completely naive about what he did wrong, and why it couldn't work the way he thought.
Right. Well, it goes back to when what we talked about in the last week or two, when they did a little clip of the Shield. It's like, I don't know how many people were rooting for the main character in the Shield to actually die. I don't think anyone was. But the best case scenario, as far as just if you like the character, like, oh, you wish he would have that moment, that clarity, where he would realize what he's done and what he's been and how wrong he's been.
Right.
And I'm not spoiling for people whether that happens with that character or not. I guess to some extent, maybe at best, we would hope something like that could happen for David. I just don't know, because, like, for example, the main thing that the Sid situation, she's been pretty much upfront with him and said exactly what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And it still didn't land. And if that didn't land, I don't know what will. Unless, I mean, but then again, I don't know what they have in store for the next 3 episodes. Something might happen of a more monumental nature that might cause a change, a shift to him. I mean, for all we know, I mean, I don't know if Hawley will do it because of the Marvel thing. But then again, it's 3 episodes and he's out. And, probably anything Marvel related just is going to revert to Disney at this point anyway. So he may say, screw it. And maybe they didn't, maybe they'll just let him, because it's like, it doesn't count anyway. And we might get an older version of Charles Xavier by the end of all this, which there's part of me that keeps wanting to, like, it kind of would make sense because he's still alive somewhere. Bring in Patrick Stewart. Why not?
Hell yeah.
He's doing Picard. Why not take one more crack at that? It's well before the time of Logan. Anyway.
I've thought about that aspect, and just sort of my last thought, if we're theorizing about where it could go, the one thing that I think could shake David out of his oblivion would be someone powerful enough to do to him what he did to Sid, and not in a malevolent manner, but in a benevolent manner. And if his father could find him in the present and enter his mind and manipulate his mind against his will to do something, that might bring it home to David what he did to Sid, and would also break, his sort of focus on how he was raised by Farouk and how Farouk twisted his mind, and focus that more on his father and the issue of maybe all this is about, like, he just never felt loved because of how things happen and how he was raised, and the father who could have taught him to use his powers wasn't there.
Right.
So, that's the sort of theory I have for how, if you want to redeem David's understanding, you can't redeem his character, but you can redeem his understanding and maybe make him not stay completely evil. That's how you get inside his head, and that's how he could at least gain empathy, because it would have happened to him. And you have to think, I mean, if you're God, it would kind of hard to it's kind of hard to have empathy for people if you're God, because you don't you don't have the experience other people have. You can't die. You can do whatever you want. And, so.
Yeah, I know. I've watched Preacher. By the way, when the hell is that coming back? Does anyone know when that's
I don't know. Delightful show.
I'm just curious. Because when I watch a show like Legion, for some reason a show like that kind of occurs to me, especially with all the God talk. And I just realized I think they're gonna have a final season. Yes, I'm wasting time on our podcast just to look it up because I'm curious. I don't care. And plus, the last season was really good.
It was really good.
August 4th. Oh, it's coming back. Okay. It's coming back soon. Cool. Podcast. Yeah. Anyway. All right. I thank you so much for holding up the lion's share tonight. But I'm thinking we're gonna bring it to a close here. Is that all right? It's all right.
Yeah.
I ain't all right.
That's all right.
I need your goddamn permission. If you enjoyed this podcast, and especially the dulcet tones of Brian and my meanderings, you know what? You'd probably really enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. Like the page and join the conversation about shows like Legion, like all the stuff that's dark and Orange is the New Black, and God knows what else is coming out lately. You can also follow us on Twitter. I know I skipped iTunes. I'll get to it. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast. STVD as in Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm changing things up. I'm changing the order. And really importantly, you can find us on iTunes. Look up Serious TV Drama Podcast. You can subscribe to our feed, as well as rate and review us there. Heck, just Google us and you'll find us 8 million other places, and you can listen to us there as well. You can find us on freaking YouTube. It'd be nice to get like 2 views there. Anyway, we will be back next week to talk about the next episode of Legion. And as I said at the top of the podcast, I do believe there will be a Dark Season 2 podcast coming in the next week to 10 days. I think we may have a full complement of the 2019 podcasters for on the STVD staff. I feel kind of bad because there's certain people we used to podcast with that I've kind of like, whatever. People should be like, whatever happened to Vicky? Where's Jason? Not doing any superhero stuff right lately. That's why. But yeah, we will be doing Dark fairly soon, and as I said in our last podcast, you can count on us. We're going to do Mindhunter next month once that releases. I will be binging the F out of that. I just say the F. Wow. I just self-censored. Have I not cursed this entire podcast?
I think I out-cursed you for once.
Oh, you. Wow. Well, I guess I wasn't the Dan on the podcast then. All right. Anyway, obviously I'm tired, so I'm going to close it here. Again, thanks to you, Brian, for joining us here and really amazing us with your thoughts and observations as
no. I'm just a guy looking in the eyes of a TV show and telling it I love it. That's all, man.
I thought we were about to have a scene from Love Actually there for a second.
Exactly. Just a guy standing in front of a girl.
Oh, yeah. Was that Notting Hill? I forget which one. It's one of those. I've not seen any of these movies, of course. Never seen them. Never. No. Constant loop in my head. No. Anyway. Oh, wait.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's what she said. Anyway. So, this time, unlike last podcast, I'm going to remember to play our rinky-dink music through the microphone to close. Because we're so professional. Oh, well. I should have learned how to freaking do the post-production stuff myself. We could have had a really good-sounding podcast. Anyway, once again, thanks, Brian, and good night to everybody out there, and good night to you, and again, good night to everybody out there.
Good night, everyone.
course, I already said goodnight, but I wonder, should I play the whole thing? It's like a minute and a half.
I think if you cut it off, you're fine.
It's too bad but it has that really nice, cool way to end. Ding,
it does.
But it's a whole minute and a half. And we were doing so well. We came in like just around an hour, but of course I have to add to it. Anyway, I'll use this part here at the end. Good night, everybody, once again.